There we are. We are live.
Live.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Oh, there's the camera. Welcome to another episode of At Home with Mark. We're in my friend Bryan Ewald's studio. It's the Elsewhere room, is what you're calling it?
Yeah, that's I named it that years ago when it was my last house, and I had a basement set up where like my keyboard would be sitting on my washer and dryer, and like it was just like my utility shelves would be right there, and
now you got different utility shelves.
And but when I started this, the idea was that I was just recording stuff for fun on my own, but I wasn't really doing session work from home because it was pre-computer or people were using ADATs and DA38s, and I actually when I moved into this house, I still had just a Fosdex 16-track reel-to-reel.
What?
So yeah, I didn't start using a computer and Pro Tools until I was in here, and we've been here for 20 years now. But so you can't really do remote session work
with reel-to-reel.
Yeah. Nobody's sending you, and nobody's using half-inch 16-track tapes anywhere. So like,
that's hilarious.
But the goal was like when I started recording for other people here, and I was coming up with a name. It was like, where the guitars were just always recorded elsewhere. It was like they didn't know what the name. They were like, oh yeah, where'd you record we did those somewhere else. So the Elsewhere room was just kind of a
that's great
random spot.
That's great. What are people? Can you guys hear us? Well, we were working on some audio stuff before. Can everybody hear? Okay, just give us a thumbs up in the chat. So Bryan and I have been talking about hanging out and doing this kind of thing forever. Probably years now, and then I was like, you know what? There's an excuse to do it. Why don't we just do the show again? Because Bryan was on the season 1, which I appreciated you doing and helping me kickstart all this stuff
remotely. Yeah.
So this is way cooler. And Bryan's actually besides you doing the thing you do with PRS and doing studio work and session work and all that stuff, Bryan actually plays the hell out of the bass and played a couple. Did you do a couple gigs or just one gig with us at one time?
I think I did two, but I think they were both the same place. Yeah. I think you called me for a couple other ones. There was like a couple Baltimore hits, but they were just dates I couldn't do.
Yeah. But he's a hell of a bass player too.
Well, that's very kind of. I enjoyed that a lot because I don't do many bass gigs, and usually when I do bass gigs, they've been like, I'm doing, it's more like song stuff where it's like, oh, there's a part kind of thing. Like in your kind of like improvisational jam kind of thing, like I do that on guitar all the time, and I love that. But on bass, it was so out of my like, and when I play bass,
it to you too.
When I play bass here, like I'm playing parts on songs on records, so it's a very different, and that was so much fun. Like I was like, man, I'll do that anytime you need it.
I thought we were cooking that night. It was fun.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do this because, Bryan has a killer studio here, and we didn't really talk about this.
They said it sounds fine. Thank you.
Great. Thanks,
that says a little low. Okay. Well, here, you know what? I can fix that.
Let's fix it. But while you're fixing it.
Yeah.
So you said you've been here for 20 years, but did you build this immediately? And how long did this take to make this room happen?
So, well, when we were shopping for a place, so my wife and I were married in 2000. So we got married. We were renting in the area. Then we were expecting our first son, our oldest, Aiden. Mm-hmm. And we thought, okay, now is the time to buy. It's going to be much easier to move with 2 of us than 3 of us. Mm-hmm. We wanted to stay in the area for the schools, townhouses. And this was at the beginning of the market, ramp up.
Oh, yeah.
So we just started looking around, and we had our budget, and, we're looking at places. And we looked for a long time, and this place, when we moved in, we'd look, and we're like, hey, this could be the baby's room, and this could be this, and of course I'm going like, where am I going to put my studio? But I mean, mind you, it's part of my livelihood. So this room is paid for itself. So still, when we saw this place, it was a little bit above our budget at the time. But if we had waited another year, it would have been way out of our budget. We lucked out when we did. But when I walked in here, the whole house was great. The whole basement, half the basement was furnished. This was cinder block. Like
Oh,
this
perfect.
was like it was sloppy drywall, cinder block walls, cement floor. It was like this wall here was semi-open, so you could see the back of the washer and dryer.
Okay.
And but it was a storage room. So I took up the majority of the storage of the house. So we have like an understair storage, but it's it's cozy. And as you see, like I've utilized every like cases. I do have a storage unit that has a couple other cases and stuff. I can't, but like, to record drums and everything, it's cozy. It's really a one man operation most of the time,
That's fun.
but it's my father-in-law and my brother-in-law also helped with the electric, but my father-in-law and I basically built this place. He brought the know-how, and he would and I was learning how to do drywall, and the most money I spent on anything was the ceiling, and it was like that's it's a super cheap like fake wood floor, but the wood like that's cedar, and the whole reason I did that was I did like a runners of like 1x1x2s, and then put some compressed fiberglass insulation to help dampen the sound a little bit. And I didn't want to do drywall on this. I hate drywall anyway, but drywall up over your head is a pain in the ass. So I was like, I bet if I did like some sort of like wood ceiling, and then I looked at how much it was going to cost, and I was like, you know what? That's where I'll put my money, just because I did. But I'm so glad I did, not just the look, but I think it definitely helps sound. And that room was obviously we built that. And the
So do you primarily use that as like isolation booth and vocal booth kind of thing?
It originally that was the idea. So that's I would track vocals in there. I would track I have guitar for a long time. All guitar amps were in there, and I would go in there and twist knobs and sit out here. And then I started using more like cabinets in there and heads, or I'd even like run an amp as a head into a cabinet in there. And I still do that quite a bit, but I rely pretty heavy on the aux. So my main recording chain is sitting here plugged in. Whatever amp I'm using is going into the aux. I usually have a cabinet in there live too, so if I need to pull up a mic from there, or I have that option. But and it's pretty well isolated. I can crank something up pretty loud in there, and you hear it out here, but it's not bad. I mainly want to hear what's coming through the speakers. But this thing it was almost like it was designed for somebody doing what I do. Like it's because going fully, Kemper, Axe Effects, those are very cool, and they're very versatile and all that stuff. But like when you have a bunch of amps that you love the way they sound, and you just want the back end, you want cabinets, you don't, changing the cabinets is the biggest pain in the butt. I can switch guitars easy. For me to change cabinets, I have to go in and move something out. I don't have them all mic'd up and ready to go. So, or the space to do that. So it was like when that thing came out, I was like, it's got me written all over it. So, and it's exceeded I actually thought I was going to use it more as a backup. Like I'd still do that like 80% of the time. And this would be when I want like something different. It's the other way around. That almost always,
It makes everything way more efficient, dude. Like for someone that has to be working as much as you do with this, it's like, why? No fuss, no muss. And like the cabinets in there sound awesome too. Like I really liked when I borrowed one. I was like on the fence about like maybe I should just buy one of these now, because I like how my Two Rock sounds, and I don't necessarily, even though I hear amazing things about the HX Stomp and how great that stuff is.
Yeah, I mean I've got all that. I've got one of those, or I've got the Stomp on other board. And they're great. To me the difference is, a lot of it is a feel too. Like when I first hooked this up, and I've just got it coming through the monitors, like it reacted and felt like I was playing to an amp. Like usually with the modeling stuff, like in the mix, nobody else is gonna know. Like, but you as a player, there's a different feel. And like I do a lot of session work with Jim Ebert out at Q or 38 North down, and he's got a method where it's like drums, bass, guitar, track live. You start in the morning. It's a song a day for whatever artist is coming in. And they would have a Kemper sitting there because, well, just to keep noise down, because they usually put the guitar amps where the drums are. So so there's no bleed. You track your scratch tracks along with the bass and drums through this Kemper, and then when they're done, you hook up the real amps and you do it. And I said, well, we could do that, or I said I can bring this aux and something, and like, and they're like, well, cool. It still probably will be a scratch track thing. And as soon as we hooked, and it like felt great, but they were like, wow, well, this is just the rig. So now, like every time, I mean, I brought like this little Pro Junior, and that's my studio backline. And if they need something else, like, oh, you want a stereo delay like in the back end, or or you just want a sound of like a little tiny 10-inch speaker cabinet, or a closed back 412, like, and but we're not redoing it with real amps later. Like, I still have a couple producers who I send tracks to who are like, the whole idea, like, please send me mic cabinets. I don't want any, like, and I'll usually send them 3 tracks of the same thing. It'll be like, one is a real mic, and 2 of them are different aux mics. I'm not labeling it. You pick which one you like, but I bet you use one of the aux things.
Oh, man, that's great. I think I mean, I probably will end up getting something like that. I just played through that Boss Waza tube expander thing, too. Is everything still cool?
Hey, yeah, I was just looking at, hey, Frankie, what's going on?
Oh, yeah, Frankie. So I played through that Boss tube expander thing. That thing's pretty cool, too. Like, I was pretty impressed with, as a competitor in terms of...
I think the technology is there, and people are, like, realizing how... I mean, it's the same thing with anything. Like, I mean, if you look at keyboards of the 80s when they were getting into, like... FM synthesis was really cool and it had a thing, but like if you really wanted a B3 sound, there was nothing like and still if you mainly played B3 and you're like, well, it's still not the same. But to 99% of us who, the sounds I get, the B3 sounds I get out of this for me are like so great compared to like what I could get out of like a keyboard 20 years ago, you know what I mean? And I've got a Wurlitzer 200A sitting there. I use this to record all the time because it's already plugged in and it's quiet. And I've actually sat here and like A-B'd them and like dialed it in. And I got to the point where like I can't tell a difference. Like technology has come a long way. It's figuring out. There's 2 things about it and this is going to sound weird because of what the room we're sitting in, but in a lot of ways. Like I grew up playing one guitar and one amp primarily. Like I made my living with this Mexican Stratocaster into either a PV Classic 50, and then I got this thing.
I had one.
But and it was great. And you take the gear that you have and you learn to make whatever sounds you need out of it. And as much as I love different guitars because they're different. Everyone has a feel and a character and they make me play different. So, and I don't have a sound. I'm not like, oh, my sound is this and this. Like
you don't think so?
Well, no, I don't mean like a specific. I change all the time. But I don't. It was never. But even the way I listen to stuff, like I love, like Jeff Beck. Like the sounds change, like within one song, and it's like it's this kind of like. What instrument is that sometimes? And it's textures and things like that, and different guitars can do now. But you also listen to somebody like Joey or Ariel Posen or something, and it's like, and if they use the same guitar and the same amp and did a whole record, I'd be great with that too because it sounds so good. Like I don't think one is better than the other. It's like, what are you drawn to? And I always realize that I'm like, I'd pick up like a Gretsch or something. I'd be like, this could never be my meat and potatoes guitar. But it's super cool, and I wish I had one, And so growing up, this was my dream. Like I wanted, and I don't have a lot of repetition. Like I don't have like 6 strats, or it's like, and each one of these, some of them are purely sentimental, and I'm just going to keep them anyway. But almost all of these have some sort of story or connection, and I use them for different things regularly in the studio. I don't need them. For sure, I could do what I do with much, much less, and it'd be totally fine. But
stuff's cool.
Well, that and a lot of the stuff is also stuff I can
If you click on those two, Bryan, if
Yeah.
you click on the actual and it'll say show, and you can like pull it up on the screen so that people can see their.
This is my buddy Charlie.
Nice.
Charlie, hey, how do you hide that?
Just click it again.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So Charlie, this is made from solid titanium. Charlie makes these furious slides. Or he made this for me, and he made me a bar for my lap steel. It's like it. Feel the weight.
Oh wow.
And it sounds closer to glass than metal.
Right.
And it's crazy and insanely durable.
Yeah.
Like I used to break glass slides, so I just started using brass or chrome.
I love brass.
And
I have Ariel's slide in my pocket.
Yeah.
And I always used to use glass because of Derek.
Yeah.
For a long time, but I have broken. Have you ever tried bone slides?
I haven't tried them, but I've seen them. Yeah.
Super interesting. I mean, I wouldn't go that direction anymore.
Yeah.
Because I found this, but like that's
I
not
love
as heavy as I.
This I have two of these. One stays in my gig stuff. One stays in here. And then he made me this killer bar for my lap steel, or
Nice.
And he's
cool.
He's I think he's working like SpaceX. Like he's a aerospace machinist and stuff. Like works. It's hard to work, I think, with titanium. Not most people don't have access to tools to do what he's doing.
That's like Lex Luthor stuff.
Yeah.
So we deviated a little bit, but like, how long did this take to do?
So building
how
this.
How many months did that take?
Mind you, I was gigging constantly, and we were expecting. It was like within the first year that we moved, and then. So it was a process, and the build out wasn't super long, but like everything else, it's the finish work and the details. I'd paint, but it's changed. Like if you saw pictures of what it looked like when I started, the layout has changed. I've rearranged a million times.
Mm-hmm.
The drums didn't used to always be set up; they were like kind of half set up, and the drums were in this corner for a long time, and the desk was over here, and and it's really changed a lot in the past year and a half, 2 years. Okay. So I keep going through these areas, and we were talking about Tim Pierce earlier.
Yeah.
So Tim, I've been a fan of Tim for years, just reading his name and liner notes and stuff, and got to know him a few years ago through PRS. And I was out in LA in I think 2019 or something, and reached out to him, and he had me over, and like I thought I had my setup like where I liked it. I was like pretty comfortable. Mm-hmm. And his workflow, he's in much more in this cockpit kind of thing,
mm-hmm.
but his workflow is very much like everything needs to be hooked up. If I have to, I didn't keep a pedal board really on hand. It was like, I got to go pull that from, it's upstairs by the door because I used it at a gig,
mm-hmm.
or I just grab a single pedal or something. But it was like, anytime I needed to do something, there was a process.
Yeah.
And when you're in the creative thing, or you're just trying to keep your momentum, that kills it.
Yeah.
And it did one of two things. It either completely took something that I could have gotten done in 3 hours, and it was a 6-hour thing because of all the stopping and starting, or it was, you know what, I'm gonna not use the thing I really want to use,
mm-hmm.
because this is just easier. And guitars are it used to just be guitars were hanging on that wall.
Yeah.
I had one extra little stand, and a lot of these lived in their cases. It wasn't about, this is not necessarily just about displaying. This is because it's me.
Access.
The thing was, if something was put away in a case and I had to dig it out, and I'm in the middle of a track, and I'm like, oh man, I'd love to use it. I'll just use this instead.
Yeah.
So I want to be able, if I'm in anything that's close by, it's because I was using this. I was recording yesterday, and these were probably things that, I keep these or this little floor stand ready,
mm-hmm.
and everything's within arm reach. I have mics always set up, so if I need to do acoustics, I can just pull a mic out. I'm not running things. The drums are all mic'd up. That used to take me half a day to get the drums set up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't record a lot of drums down here, but now I've got two sons that are both killer drummers, and I use them on sessions. It used to be that's a process. But one thing during the pandemic, I fine-tuned, the amps were set flat against the wall, but then I was like, man, if I angle them here, I can get farther over here. I can fit the pedal board.
Yeah.
And If you look around here, I have bought so many hooks and clamps
Yeah.
and like little LED, like those little like under cabinet lights.
Yeah.
So because like being stuck at home during the pandemic was like for me to sit here and go like I'd see like a little bit of wall space and be like, I bet I could put some cables over there. I was like, so I'm digging through my utility. I was like, oh, I've got some coat hooks. I'll buy some more coat hooks. And then, anything I can use, to hang something because I want it accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have all my cables in a box that lived underneath there. So like, again, it was like moving things, shuffling, pull it out, digging through the cables. So,
that's my wife's pet peeve. She's always, if we put stuff in our storage closet, she's like, don't you dare put that in front of that because that means I have to dig behind that. I gotta move your thing to get to the thing that I want. I'm like, yeah, no, I get it. Now I understand.
Well, it really is like, part of it is like I geek out over that stuff. I love it. Like obviously I love gear, and I went through a thing when I was in my old house when I had the place with the basement I was telling you about. I had a couple amps. I had maybe like 5-6 guitars. I don't know. I mean, but I got really into keyboards. Like, not playing a ton of them. I mean, I dabble, but like I wouldn't call myself I wouldn't hire myself out on gigs as a keyboard player. But I was fascinated with them, and like I'm such a geek. Like I didn't want just one keyboard that had the sounds in it. I bought one of those and it was neat, but I was like, I want a Mellotron, and I want a Rhodes, and I want a Wurlitzer, and I want a clavinet, and I never got a Mellotron, but there was a point where I had this Rick Wakeman looking setup in my basement. I had the Wurlitzer. Mind you, this was the 90s, and stuff wasn't so inflated. So like, they weren't cheap, but they weren't bad. And Atomic Music, like I would go to Atomic, and I wouldn't be shopping for something specific. It would just be early days of eBay and Atomic Music. I'd see like, ooh, there's a Rhodes. Oh, it's affordable, and I get it home, and almost always it needed work. So like then I spent 6 months digging into like how to tune it, how to fix it, and I realized I'm spending all my time like maintaining keyboards and
Does the thing have a timer?
No, but the battery might have croaked on me. Let me see.
It's okay.
That might have a timer. Oh yeah, no, it's got plenty of bit. I think. Oh no. Yeah, it'll be a warmer light. That may crap out on us again, but
It's all good.
it'll be mood lighting. We'll put candles up.
Yeah.
And then I realized at that point I was like, I need to put myself in check, and like I'm not playing these things. The clavinet I had for 16 years unplayable. It needed I got it as a project. So like it needed, I put hammer tips on it, and I was like halfway through restringing it and re-yarning it and I find like I gave it to, I was running the School of Rock for a while, and like one of the kids who was there was like got super into Stevie Wonder, and I was like, hey, I've got a clavinet. He was like a total tech geek too, so like I was like, I'll give it to you. You can hang on to it. Like, if you want to finish restringing it, I'll show you. I've got the papers of like, here's how to do this. Go to this website. I'll walk you through it. And then you can hang on to it for a couple of years. Like, just have it to mess with if you want to put the work into it. And he started, and same thing. Like, you'd sit down with it and you'd work on it for like 2 hours and be like, oh, I'm 2% in.
Yeah,
so like,
no, man.
and I finally got it working. And after having it working for 2 years, as little as I played it, I was like, and the little spaces I have, and I'm a guitar player. I'm not I'm going like, what am I doing? So like, I sold the Wurlitzer stayed. I tried to, like, if there's anything I'm really not using, or there's no sentimental attachment, I'm not a, School of Rock, yeah.
Nice.
I'm not a collector in the sense of like, I want playable stuff. I want, I have a few vintage pieces that are all original that I've gotten recently, and they don't really leave the house, and they're as much and for investment as anything.
Right.
I use them, but like that's instead of putting that money into a bank, because who knows what, they may be worth the same thing in 10 years, they may be worth double, they may be worth 10 times, you don't know. But
Yeah.
but in the meantime, I'll use them.
Right.
And this is all liquid. So like if, crap hit the fan and I needed money,
Easy.
I could sell tons of this stuff and I'd still be able to work. So I kind of look at it, and they're tax write-offs in the moment. So like that's how I justify it.
Dude, trust me, I have those conversations with myself all the time. Should I get this? And last year I think when we went to do our taxes, my accountant was like, "Man, you're gonna kind of take a little bit of a hit to it this year. You didn't gig, right? Because the pandemic." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "What's the best way to offset that?" And he was like, "You got to buy more gear."
Yeah.
I looked at my wife and I was like, "Thanks, Tom." So, all right. So about the gear. So a lot of the people that watch this are all into gear, obviously. Like YouTube heavy is into gear.
For sure.
And you have you've got a bunch of PRS because you're connected to PRS. What was the first PRS guitar that you got?
So
Just curious.
the short version of this is that I grew up in Annapolis, which is where Paul's from.
Mm-hmm.
I actually worked at the factory 2 years after I graduated high school in the early 90s. And it was like, I was teaching at a local music store, and I wasn't really gigging much at all. I wasn't gigging. I was making my living teaching guitar, and I was like 19 years old, and I got a call from PRS when they were a tiny little shop still on Virginia Avenue, because somebody who was applying there used me as a reference. And I'm like, I'm a 19-year-old kid.
That's funny.
But it was somebody who had met me, who didn't know anybody in town, but just because I was a guitar player, they were like, I'm going to use a guitar player reference to get a job at a company. But when they called, they were like, hey, we're hiring a couple positions. Do you want, and I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool, And even though they were getting to be a big deal, I guess, I mean, they were, but like in my mind, they were just it was the local guitar factory.
Yeah.
I didn't really, it hadn't hit me like what a big deal they were outside. In Annapolis, everybody knew somebody who knew Paul, it was cool, but it wasn't like, and I worked there for about just under a year, and then I joined this band while I was there, and started gigging all the time, and was like, I can't maintain both, and I was like, I'm much better at playing guitar than I am at buffing and sanding them. So like, but it was that's how I connected with them.
Right.
But then for years, and I had like an EG, like one of the early EGs when I worked there.
Okay.
I got one like, and it had like those 3 like big Fralin like domino pickups. Like
I don't remember it, but I know what you're talking about.
People talk about the Silver Sky like Paul, the first time Paul's ever tried to make anything Fendery. It's like, no, I mean they've done all kinds of bolt-ons and different pick guard, 3 pickup kind of things. But
well, the narrow field guitar that you used to see Jimmy Herring play.
Yeah. There's been plenty of stuff.
So.
And I've always been more drawn to single coil guitars, and more recently I've fallen in love with great sounding. Like I grew up in the '80s, so the humbucking pickups were like high output, like plug it into a rack of effects. Like it was cool, but like I loved single coils because they had a character, and it wasn't until I actually played some like low output vintage humbuckers way later in the game that I was like, oh, if this is what humbuckers sounded like, I probably would have dug them a lot more. And now I'm falling in love with them. But I keep just wanting to check the So anyway, but my relationship like that I have now, I mean, I would still run into people. I knew people who worked there. There's people there now who were working there when I was there, 30 years ago.
I'm sure.
And
has Rich been there forever?
I don't know. I met Rich. I mean, I've known Rich for a long time, but he wasn't there in the 90s, or not when I was there. I mean, but I started going back there. Actually, is my friend Jim Cullen, who's a great bass player, and I've known him for years. He actually worked at the guitar store I was teaching in as a sales guy. He started working at PRS, and then he was like a sales director. He's now like the national sales man. Like he's been there forever, but he was playing with me occasionally with my band, the Jarflies, with Jimmy Davies. And like when Larry Melton couldn't make it, he would be one of the people who would come sub. And Jimmy was a PRS guy, and if there was a hollow body crack. They had a very short amount of time when the hollow body thing was new. They had maybe a dozen of them crack and shipping on the way. In between the F hole and the three-way toggle, there was only this, and if any pressure went on the top of the case, so they had to redesign the case. They changed so a couple of them came back from dealers. They would repair it. They weren't going to resell it, but they would go to an artist for like stupid good deal. And Jimmy had like 3 or 4 of them, and he came to a Jarflies gig, and Jim was like, "Hey, we got another hollow body coming in," and Jimmy's like, "Yeah, cool." I was like, "Dude, like hook a brother out, like I'd love one." And they were, and Jim Cullen was like, "Oh, would you play one?" I was like, "I mean, I'm a guitar geek. I mean, if I could, if it was a decent discount, I could afford it. Like, I mean," and so at that time, I was playing in a bunch of bands, like always, but like a few of the bands, one of the bands I was hired gun with, and was on RCA, and so I was traveling a bit with them. I was just about to go to Europe for the first time ever for anything, but it was for gigs.
That's cool.
And I mean, it wasn't like I was some huge name or anything, but like I was a hometown guy working 7 days a week, and then I was traveling more, and I never in a million years would have gone to any company and been like, "Hey, I need an endorsement." Like, I just felt like I don't, who's gonna care or know what I'm playing? And on my behalf, he went through artist relations and was like, he's a hometown guy. He plays a Fender, and part of the reason I didn't play PRS early on is, I mean, I was a working guitar player. They were expensive, and they didn't have the S2s. They didn't have all that stuff then. So he got me this hollow body that came in, and so I started playing it quite a bit, and I loved it, but I was still like a single coil guy. Like I always, and then the SEs were pretty new, and I was like, man, I don't have a P90 guitar, and they got me one of those. So like, I kind of had this unofficial deal with him, and he said, look, just put it on your website that you play PRS, but there wasn't any like you have to play these only or anything. It was very, but I would still do most gigs where I'd have a Tele or a Strat, which were my two. One of those two would be my comfort zone, and some kind of PRS.
Yeah.
And then I think it was in 2010 or 2011, I was doing a tour. I was going to be gone for like 2.5, 3 months. I had 3 guitars with me. It was a Tele, which I was using for most of the gig. I brought a Jazz Master I had at the time because I needed something with a vibrato bar on a couple songs, and I was playing slide on like 2 songs, and I needed something with beefier pickups, so I had this Les Paul. It was a pain because I didn't have a guitar tech or roadie, and it was like and I just didn't own a PRS. I had a couple of times, but I didn't own one that fit the bill of what I needed. And we did the first like 2 weeks of the tour, but then it routed through here. Like we started up in like New England or whatever, and then came through here before we went out west. And the Starla was pretty new. And I was like, man, I really would check one of those out. And I called Jim and I said, look, I'm not asking for anything. Like, I'm not asking for a hookup. I'm just like, could I borrow one? Because I could leave the Les Paul and the Jazz Master at home and just bring the Starla and a Tele, and it would make my life easier. Plus, I'd be really curious to try it. And from that first gig, and it's that blue Starla over there.
Yeah.
From that first gig, I played that Starla. I barely picked up the Tele. I ended up doing the Tele in a different, like a drop D tuning or something I needed for a song. But I played that the rest of the tour. I came home from that tour, and it's one thing you're like, okay, it's working on this gig, but we're playing the same music every night. When I get home, it's going to be like, oh, I'll have a Starbelly gig and a Jarflies gig and maybe a wedding gig, and like back to my regular world where it's like I bring different guitars for different things. But I brought that guitar out to everything for a while. Like, I don't play a lot of country, but I was playing with this guy Shane Gamble a bunch then,
I know
and like doing more like that. And I was like, I could do a country gig with it and get totally. I was like, that guitar, like, was like my first. I could bring this and not have a Fender Strat or Tele at a gig, and of course this was pre Silver Sky or anything else like that. Like, and I was like, that changed my world. And then it was right around that time. Actually, it was almost exactly 10 years ago this month that they came over here for the first time. to film a demo, and they didn't really have a demo team like there wasn't they didn't have a dedicated video guy. This guy Andrew's been there I think for like 8 years now, who does like I don't like people give me all this credit for like, oh, those demos look so great. Like I show up, they tell me what guitar to play, I talk about it, I play it, like the video, the audio, like that's him.
That,
like
yeah.
he's I'm like I'm just the dancing monkey, you know. That like but he does all that well, and him, and now there's a guy Trent who helps him with it, but he, you know, their team do all that.
They do always look slick. And
yeah.
Like, yeah. So, well.
But that, like, after that, like, I really kind of, and then the videos kind of just started organically. It was like they had me do one, and it was like, hey, we've got this other one, and then it was like, there was really nobody. I mean, YouTube wasn't new, but it wasn't like at the time. It wasn't like, oh, we need a dedicated video like, it was just something. It got to the point where you're like, okay, we need to have videos for every product that comes out now. It's a no-brainer. Every company's like, but at the time it was like, oh yeah, it might be cool to have a video. It wasn't necessary. The world was a different place. But
when you go in, Bryan, do you shoot like all day?
No. Well, it totally depends. Sometimes we do 2 or 3 guitars. Sometimes it's for one guitar. But no, I go in and it's usually like, here are the 2 guitars we need to get for today, and I'm not, you know, trying to. This has nothing to do with them and their organization, but like, there's always some kind of hiccup because, like, you know, everything is in disarray right now with, you know, supply of like parts. So, but they've been like, they're killing it over there as far as like what they're doing and designing, and it's a big company ish, but it's like, the number of guitars, like, they're maybe at like 100 guitars a day, I think, out of the U.S. factory, tops, maybe a little less. I don't remember exactly, but it's somewhere around there. And that's increased over the past. But you can't just flip a switch and go, oh, we're going to make 200 a day because demand. So like their demand has gone, and so keeping it. So like when we're over there and we're like, hey, we need to film this particular model, and they're like, well, the trick is we need to get one. So the marketing team is like, we're trying to secure like a Silver Sky Maple fingerboard when they first came out or whatever. And of course, a lot of those launches would be like right before NAMM. So like they're shipping stuff out. And like, I mean, there's been times where I've gone to film one video and they're like, okay, we couldn't get that guitar today, but we're going to do this other one instead. And then in 2 weeks, I'll go back. So, but there might be times where I'm in there 3 or 4 or 5 times a month filming stuff, and then I might not go in for 2 or 3 months. So it really depends on what they've got coming out and what they need, and it's super cool because I get to play a lot of great stuff, and I get to see stuff sometimes way before it comes out.
Right.
But the hard part is that it's like with somebody, you know, predisposed. Like I am, it makes you want so many more things. You're like, because I've played things, I'm like, well, I don't really need one of these. It's pretty close to something I already have, but then you play it, you're like, just try to go like, how do I justify it? You know, I do have 2 Silver Skies,
but it's
like,
a maple fretboard and a rosewood, right?
Yeah,
so, yeah, that's fine.
It wasn't like one of those things like I'm gonna buy this because I need to have one of each at all. Like I'm much like that's the first one that came out, and that's the one I used in the first video, and I fell in love with it, and I knew I wanted one anyway, and I talked them into letting me have that particular one because I knew they were going to be back ordered for a year, and they used to send me pre-pandemic. They used to send me around to do like clinics too. So whether it be like at trade shows like NAMM, I'd be the guy, but they'd send guitars for that. But like I might go to a music store in Chicago or, you know, Salt Lake City or Indianapolis or wherever, or like to like Sweetwater or call center for like, you know, and to talk about the latest and greatest. But they'd send me to some store and they wouldn't have Silver Skies in because the ones they got in, they've already sold through.
Right.
So I was like, you can't send me there to talk about some guitar that came out 4 months ago
that I don't have,
and we can't even talk. And the marketing team didn't have enough to I said, look, if I can have this one and you don't have any to send, I will bring my personal guitar on the plane. Whoever can play, they can play it. They can't sell it, but like, if you want to hear it and you want to get your hands on it. So like, 4,000 people have probably played that guitar because
Sure.
I've been at like trade shows where it's like getting passed around.
Yeah.
I think when they first announced it, I had a local thing at Ryan Fowler's, and I was bringing it, and I even brought the J Mod, and Ryan put some kind of hint on his thing about it, and I don't know, it was a Saturday afternoon, and I think I had a gig in DC that night, so I was like, I got to be out of here by this time, and I show up to the store, and there's like people outside of the store. People had driven up from like southwestern Virginia because they wanted to, like this mythical Silver Sky that they haven't been in the stores yet. So like they hadn't even shipped, but I had this one. But because it was announced, I was allowed to bring it. And my clinic was like 10 minutes long. I talked about some stuff. I said, look, I'm going to stand over there. You can come ask me whatever questions. We can talk gear, PRS, whatever you want. I said, line up. Play the guitar, no more than a minute. Hand it to the next person. Don't be that guy. And I said, Ryan, when we're done, I was like, can you just have this restrung for me so I can go to my gig? And so, and it was awesome. It blew my mind how many people were just like, the internet can cause a real stir quick.
That's for sure. I mean, and that guitar was so like highly anticipated, and like. I'm glad that it's kind of blown over. And sorry guys if we don't see your comments and stuff. We're doing our best if there's any questions, but we'll check it.
Yeah, and we're gonna plug something in, and if there's any particular gear in here you want to hear or have any questions about.
Well, there's two specific guitars that I'm very interested in playing.
Yeah.
Is your Collins, the P91, and then those have throwbacks in it too, right? Didn't you tell me that was...
So when I got that, it had throwbacks, and they sounded great, but with a like low to mid gain, they were beautiful. Clean, they sounded good, but I felt like they were... And just any PAF style pickup, again, they're all different, right? So like when people go, oh, it sounds just like a PAF, like you could get 10 different like original PAFs, and they all sound different. So how do you say it sounds exactly like something that's so variable? And I've played some PAFs that are like insanely bright, like brighter than most tele pickups, and like and some that are really like so. And some people don't like that. Some people like the darker ones. So the throwbacks that were in there were really beautiful sounding with some gain. Clean, they were a little dark. They didn't sound bad, but like, and I was talking to. His name is going to escape me. It might be Jamie. Not somebody I think I met him in person once years ago, but like I'd heard all these great things about his pickups, and we were talking about something else, like the tone pot that had gone bad in my P bass. Like Phil Jacoby was like, call him, he'll let you know if But he has a company called Rewind Pickups. He used to be in Maryland, but he's out west, like in Utah now. And I've heard amazing things about his pickups. And we kind of started talking about that, and I said, well, I've got these, I mean, the throwbacks are amazing. Like, I wasn't like, but I was like, when I play it clean, and I play that guitar clean a lot, there's a tour that I'm doing, which is like, with the Take 6 and those guys, like I'm playing basically that into a backline deluxe reverb, and that's it. It's like, it's like,
funky picking.
Well, it's more Ray Charles. It's like it's almost like big band-esque jazz arrangements. So it's like it's clean is where I live. Maybe a tiny bit of dirt, but it's basically clean. And like I was like I want to love it on it, but I just really like it. I love the guitar otherwise. And so this guy was like asked me a bunch of questions. And he's like, I will wind you a specific set of pickups that I think will be exactly what you're looking for. And again, it was an investment, but I'm like, I love this guitar. And I'm like, if I don't love them, I can, and I put them in, and man, it's so Rewind. It's RE-WIND pickups. And I remember like 10 years ago or something when he was there was like these shootouts of like, the best PAF clones, and like in the top 10 he'd have like 2 or 3 different sets of the 10, and this one guy like he's like as knowledgeable as anybody I've ever talked to about, like he's so He's kind of like a Paul Reed Smith, kind of like Phil Jacoby, like those guys, Dave Barber. When you sit down and talk to those guys, they have broken things apart to such a crazy degree.
Level.
It's like, and I can gain little bits of knowledge, but I'm going like, I'll let you do you, and I'll just enjoy the fruits of your labor. Like I'll never understand that, but like, but you mix that kind of know-how with a creative and a great ear, and like, it's amazing. So that's what's in there now. And,
Go grab it.
Yeah.
Let's check it out. Let me see if there's any plans for a potential clinic when things get better. Someone's asking.
Yes. I don't know what the travel situation is. My studio schedule is pretty hectic, so I don't foresee myself doing a lot of traveling with PRS, but I don't know when they're going to be ready to ramp that up again. I know there's demand, but I'll probably do a lot of those maybe with Paul. Paul was talking about sending like me and Bosco France around to do a bunch. But yeah, I love clinics. But I have nothing. It's when they call me and they're like, hey, we're going to do some here and there. Like, what's your schedule like? So
right.
I usually never know in advance.
Man, it's already very resonant.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like...
So as we get into the gear talk here, so this is what he's playing through is a Collings that I picked up. It looks, believe me, if you look in here, it looks like I'm not a wealthy dude. You know, we live in a lot of these guitars, I was telling him, a lot of the vintage stuff I got back in the 90s when it wasn't nearly as crazy. Some of these things, like this, was a pure impulse buy. I was trying to hunt for the right 335, and this was on Reverb, and it was so much cheaper than I'd ever seen one. I've still never seen one. It was half of what they would normally go for, and it's got some dings.
Who cares?
And I know some people spending, on the more boutique guitars, like, look at that. But a lot of times they're not players. They're much more worried about like oh, I can't buy this because it's got a scratch. Like, I'm like, no, I don't care. I'm gonna ding it. And it was one of those, I'm gonna buy it. I hope I love it. If not, I'll turn it around. So he's just plugged into this my Deluxe. And even though it's a very different sounding amp, I will plug in. Listen to my Super.
Oh man.
Here, just for a reference in the same amp, just plug this on real quick.
Oh, did I? Oh yeah.
There's one of those silent cables anyway.
Oh, that's what?
Yeah.
I don't know if I know about that.
It's got a little sleeve on it, so like when this thing is pressed down, it's connected. When it's that, so you can like plug in and unplug without,
You just blew my mind. Oh yeah.
So this has these are throwback P90s that Throwback makes specifically for Collings. This is the Collings i30, my most recent acquisition, and I've been obsessed with like the Gibson 330 Epiphone Casino thing for a long time.
Man. Alright.
Put it here.
Watch out for this.
Try the fuzz with the humbuckers.
Okay.
And I didn't plan. It's not that I just bought those because I'm obsessed with black. It just so happened that the two that I found that were the good deal happened to both be black. But
it's kind of a nice. I would never buy a black guitar, to be honest. Like, for some reason, it doesn't jump out at me as something
Right.
that's like, ooh, instantaneously gorgeous. I
Right.
love it. But like, this is gorgeous, especially with this tort guard.
Yeah, I kind of fell in love with that.
Man, that is dirty. That's cool, man.
Yeah, the fuzz sounds killer. I definitely noticed, like, with, I mean, you know, when you're switching guitars, like, I don't do a whole lot of guitar switching on gigs because it's, you know, you dial the pedals in or dial your amp in, and unless the pickups are really close to one another, the levels
Jump.
and it's always counterintuitive to me, like, with, you know, the higher output pickup, the more you have to, like, turn up the output of your drive pedals, like, you know, the clean to drive level change, like a low output pickup, like, gets so much louder, like, it doesn't compress as much, you know.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about this is, like, this is all how I usually keep my stuff, and I'm usually playing through a Strat.
Yeah,
So it sounds completely
totally different. Yeah.
So, but man, it's like a really comfortable guitar, but what's interesting to me about it is, and I probably would just have to get used to playing something like this, but like, I mean, the neck is not, it's not overly chunky. I would say it's like
No.
in the middle, you know. But what's interesting to me is it feels narrow for some reason to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, you know, I honestly, like, I don't obsess over neck shapes. Like, people ask me sometimes questions about a certain guitar, and they're like, describe the neck, and I'm going like, oh, you know, I didn't really pay attention. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I think I only notice necks when they're extreme out of what I like, and but part of it, you know, you couldn't do this if you had to have a certain neck profile, because there's no way you're going to get this kind of stuff and have any consistency.
Right.
So like, you pick up a Rickenbacker and the neck is going to be really, really weird and small, and it changes the way you have to play. But I'm not trying to play a Rickenbacker and shred on it. You know what I mean? I'm playing parts, and so like, but like, I have a Tele over there that was my main guitar for a while, and if I get back on it now, like, I realize how much I don't like the neck on it.
Really?
It's really small. And when I got it, I was like, it's not my favorite, and I could have just changed the neck, but I just didn't, and like, I just kind of got used to it. And other people play it, and they're like, it's my favorite neck ever. It just depends on your hands, you know?
Yeah.
And
I don't feel like I have gigantic hands, but like, sometimes I feel like I like wider necks in a way.
if I were to pick a favorite neck, it would probably be this one. And this is not a 594. It's like just pre-594.
Yeah, that feels really comfy to me.
Yeah.
Like, differently than that, in a way. Yeah, this was the other guitar that I was like, I want to check this out
Here,
too.
plug it in. That's a it's called a McCarty single cut. It's basically right before the 594 came out. The control layout is
Backwards?
well, it's just laid out different than the.
Yeah. Man, it's like, what pickups are in these?
Those are
Is it the 5815?
they're 5815s, but from when Paul made the first 5815s, and then he did the low turns, then he's changed a couple things throughout time. Like, he'll make little tweaks. I had the original 5815s in him, loved them. He talked me into putting the low turns in when I got it, and I loved them also, but something about those original ones in this particular guitar just felt right, and I was going to go back to them. And then I was doing a clinic with him, and he had a set of these in there, which were just some prototypes that he made, maybe like 5 or 6 sets, and he does that all the time. He'll tweak, and he'll send a set to like Eric Johnson and Derek Trucks and the John Mayer and whoever, like, what, you know, the
Right.
tone guys that he loves, whether they end up, and it's just Paul's constantly trying stuff and so if you notice they just say like prototype something prototype
I saw
on the thing.
that.
And he goes, hey, I've got a set of these sitting on my desk. If you want to try them. And I put those in. So they're basically 5815s. I could not even begin to tell you how they differ. They're not crazy different than regular ones. But as soon as I put those in, I was like, this is staying. Like, whatever this is, I love it.
It works.
They all have sounded great. There's been nothing wrong with them, but they're super low output.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So what's the main difference with these different headstocks? Like, I never understood. Is this just for like the custom shop stuff?
No, so that shape that was the original PRS shape before he did the little scoop on the top.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a pre-factory shape. And then when they changed to the other one, Carlos Santana liked that. And you know how like Santana, the main Santana PRS still has like a different, like more rounded body.
Mm-hmm.
That's also so. Carlos likes the pre-factory headstock and body shape. So now they call that the Santana headstock, but it's really pre-factory.
Yeah.
So the only time that comes stock on a guitar is on the Santana models. But you can get, and when they were this is everything else I have from PRS is basically off the shelf. It's like, oh, cool. Oh, I want a Starla, whatever color. I like this or this. This was the first time I went in and had something built, where I picked out the top, I picked out the back, right. And when I was doing it, I was like, they're like, what fingerboard do you want? I was like, can I do Brazilian? And they're like, sure. It's like what? So I just did the headstock to be a little different. Like, I mean, I like both.
I like that headstock a lot. Yeah, that's cool.
But
and then is that so? That's a P.
They made so that's the second one. Those are the only two I've ever had built, and that's basically I was doing a gig. A couple of the gigs that I do, I use the piezo bridge pickup a lot, and I had that hollow body that did it, and it sounds cool. But one of them, I was like, man, I really need the solid body guitar works better on this gig, and so I ended up having that one made for those, and that basically I really only use that. I prefer this guitar if I'm going for that kind of Les Paul, like 59 Les Paul kind of thing. That is my go. And I had a killer R9 for a while.
Oh, really? And
I AB'd the two side by side, and I was like, I traded that R9 for the P-Bass. That's how I got that.
What year is that P-Bass?
That's 64.
Is that the one you played on my gig?
I didn't have that yet. I played my son's P-Bass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I played my son's P-Bass, and then it was after that I'm going like, why don't I own a P-Bass? Like, right. I've got all these cool, I've got a little cool old Music Master, and I've got a Rickenbacker. Like, I have all these quirky basses, and I was like, how do I not have a P-Bass? Like, it's like being a guitar player and you don't have a Strat. You're kind of like, right. Unless you play in bands where, I'm like, but I love those sounds. So, then I got silly, and I was looking around at, like, just Mexican beat basses. I was like, anything would be fine. Just find a decent one.
Yeah.
And then that came along, and that Les Paul. Ever since I got this, that R9 was. I'm gonna sell it when the price shoots up enough to where it makes sense, or if I really need the money, or the right guitar comes along. And my goal was I was gonna trade it for the right 335. I lucked into this and was able to get this without having to get rid of that.
Right.
So. It was just there, and the moment I fell in love with that P-Bass, it was at Garrett Park, and I called Rick, and I said, look, the value of these two are pretty close. If you'll do an even swap, and he's like, take the P-Bass home, use it for the weekend, Monday bring back whichever one you don't want. Like, okay. So I went back with a Les Paul.
Oh man.
Because I was like, cool. I have that. I mean, this guitar does the Les Paul thing for me as well as any Les Paul I've ever played. Like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't need two of them.
Well, here then you play this.
Yeah.
So I can hear this. People want to hear you play. They don't give a shit about me.
And normally. I got something I'm going to hook up in a second. I'll show you something kind of quirky too. But so normally when I'm running to these, I'm running into the aux and it's coming out of here. That for this stream setup, it wouldn't really work as well. So he's plugged into this. I'm plugged into my old Super Reverb that was my main gigging amp forever.
But your back's still okay.
Yeah. But I've gotten really weird in the past couple years. Like if you notice over there, I have a Roland Jazz chorus that I just recently got. I was never a chorus guy, and for whatever reason, I kind of fell in love with it. I don't use it a lot, but every once in a while, stereo. Like I never ran stereo. It was, and in the past year, I've been bringing 2 small amps out. My little board, the back half is all stereo. This board is, so right now I'm actually running into this and into that.
Oh.
So here, if you hear so I'm stereo right now.
That's cool, man. I don't know that I've ever been in a room with that like that.
And I only use a couple of like the trems. I can do panning. When you have your Leslie stereo, it's so much cool. You're like, oh, neat. Like it's
Wow.
And the only thing is that once you do it, then it becomes like, am I really doing this? Like, so both my main 2 boards, I have the back half set up stereo, and I don't bring. This is so overkill, especially so. 2 little amps, either a little Sans Era 20 watt. I feel like I haven't brought the same rig out to a gig twice in 5 years. Every time it's because I'm trying some new pedal, or these 2 amps, I'm not doing a matching stereo. I'm not doing 2 similar amps.
Right.
And they're both always on. Mm-hmm. So the only time anything changes is when there's a stereo effect. But this thing's like a little tunnel. This little Pro Junior, a tunnel of mid range, and then this has that scoop thing. So the 2 of them together just sound gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then whenever you step on a delay that's panning or that chorus, it's even if nobody else cares, it's you're going oh yeah.
I know, dude. It's what's cool about that. When you say you play the same rig, and then I'll shut up and let you play a little bit, but I think that's how it should be. You have all this cool stuff. Why not? Why not switch it up and keep it fresh? And
I was watching a clip of your video when you're talking about getting vulnerable as a player, and I don't think there's one answer that's forever. And just I've had people walk into my gig and look at my pedal board and be like I'm compensating for something, right? And part of me goes well, no, I'm very secure with who I am as a player, and I've had times where I felt like I'm explaining myself to somebody and I use that stuff, and part of it is that I don't have a gig. I don't have one thing that I might have to come mainly play keyboard and non-guitar textures on a gig all the time, where but sometimes it's also just I'm stepping on something because it sounds neat and it inspires me to do something. It's not because I don't know how to play, hand me whatever you need me to hand and I'll work with it. But the thing is, I've always been jealous a little bit of the people who have one guitar that they've had for 30 years and it's their baby and that's all they need. And
like Derek,
because it would be so nice, and I don't need to hear him step on pedal but that's a particular I couldn't be that guy and do what I do, but I don't know if I want to as much as I love that, I also love I like all kinds of textures and tones, and every time I pick up a different guitar, it makes me play different, and but that's also what speaks to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean if somebody's hey, all I need is a Les Paul and a Marshall and a cable, great. Paul Smith is that guy. Paul Smith is a guitar into an amp, and this is his pedal board is where he dials this, and that's what inspires him, and he wants to he's got this idea of this perfect sound in his mind, and it's really cool, but it also, the amp is usually cranked up super loud, and it's you're, there's times where I need something a little cleaner than just rolling my volume back,
Plus, let's be real, I kind of if you're playing in a bar, and sometimes it's a good night, sometimes it's you can get bored.
Right.
And I want to have some options to keep myself entertained. Almost
well,
as selfish as that is. It's it's just there's times when I want options.
Well, that and yes, that is a J mod behind me, and that is that amp. It was totally not one I thought I was gonna really want. I mean, I knew it would be nice, but I was I don't need 100-watt head to like. I was a combo guy through and through because it was like less trips into the bar, right?
Yep.
And then I got into heads and cabinets because I was doing this like heads out here, cabinets in there. And PRS built. There's an amp in there that PRS built me. I didn't own a PRS amp, and they're like, we want to get you an amp because you're doing these gigs, you're doing these clinics and stuff, or like even when they would come here to do demos, like in the beginning, I was like, I didn't have a PRS amp, so I was playing through it in the other room or something. So, and that amp sounds great, sounds awesome. And when this came out, the J-Mod came out, I brought one out to a gig or two that they lent me, and it's not at all what I thought it would be. Like I can open it up. It's 100 watts, but it's not one of those where like, oh, I can't even get it on 2. Like the headroom is all in that last like 30%. Like it just keeps getting louder and louder. But like it'll take like a single coil guitar and make the strings sound bigger than they are, and it's warm, and it's like I equate it to like when you drive a car that just it's fun to drive and handles great, but it has like everything you can throw at it. It's gonna like it's not an amp for everybody, but like it was so magical to me that I was like, and for a while I was bringing that out to bar gigs.
I remember talking to you when you first got it, or I remember talking to you before you got it, and you're like, yeah, I gotta wait like 6 months to get it or something crazy like that.
And I run it through I've tried my 212. Right now I have an open back 410 that I keep upstairs. That's what I bring. And one day when the gig is right, I'm gonna run stereo with my super reverb and this. Just for one gig.
Oh my god!
I'm gonna hire somebody to like help me load it in. But yeah. So and before we digress too much on that, so
yeah, we're already at an hour. See, this is what happens.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing, but this was this weekend, last weekend I did it in person. Like it just time flies by.
It
like
does.
That.
When I worked at PRS in '92 and I was broke. I think I had a guitar. I had my high school amp. That was like my childhood amp that I first bought for myself, and I traded it away. And 30 years later, it came back to me, just like that Kramer.
One guitar, yeah.
Yeah, this was it. I sold that in high school to Steve Wright from Right Way Studio.
That's funny.
And he was playing it within his band, and then he sold it. And years later, I think it had traveled around, and some band came into a studio and they had it. And he had all this tape on the back that he put on. He's like, that used to be my amp. And he got it back from them because it was just like a backup amp they had. They weren't really using it.
Yeah.
And it sat on a shelf at Right Way. And I was up there doing sessions. And he's like, dude, remember that amp you sold me? It came back. And then maybe like 2 years ago, he's like, hey, I'm getting ready. Like he basically got it back to me. And,
that's crazy.
I had sold that to him.
Year that happened.
Yeah, well, and that guitar kind of came back too. That, it's, the internet has changed the world.
So weird, man.
But I stole that to him, and I went and I bought a Mesa Boogie Studio 22 because that's a solid state Marshall, right? So I bought this. It was my first tube amp. I was still in high school, and I was like saved up my money. I don't think I was teaching yet. I think I was still I think it was like paper route money. Maybe like it was in I don't know. No, I was working for my dad. But I went and bought this amp, and when I started working at PRS. Like, I liked the amp, but I wasn't, And one of the guys working there was like, I love that amp. And he had this guitar. It was a PRS Project guitar. It was like no name on the headstock. It was beat up and like, it was just kind of weird. And you could kind of get away with doing that stuff back then. There was no serial number on it. And he wanted to trade. So I traded it. So I didn't own an amp. And then I got this call to join this band. And I told them, I'm like, full disclosure, I don't have a giggable amp. I'm looking for one, but I'm kind of broke. So who's one of the guys who's become a near dear friend of me, the bass. He was a guitar player who switched to bass for this band. He had a couple amps. He had a THD Bassman that he let me use. But he's like, I've got this amp coming that I ordered about a year ago, and he was a Robin Ford nut. It was a 100-watt Howard Dumble Overdrive Special.
What? That
he bought from Alexander in '91. So my gigging amp, when I was I was eating like McDonald's like 39-cent cheeseburgers when they had it, because and I was gigging playing like I mean, we were playing Hammer Jacks and Scandals in Ocean City, but we'd also play like the Gingerbread Man, like on Tuesday nights over in the park, or like I was playing alternative rock covers
through a
Dumble, and I honestly like I was running like a pedal thing. It was amazing, but I didn't like, and it was pre-internet, so
no one knew.
Nobody knew what it was, and so when Paul brought me in and started talking to me about, he's like, okay, so the idea, like, there's some things. It's not a Dumble clone, but like there were some things and he started explaining like the Dumble thing. And I was like, yeah, I used to gig with one. And he looked at me like I had two heads. He's like, no, you didn't. I was like, no, I did. And he's like, a clone? I was like, no, this was pre-clones. And he was like, does he still have it? I was like, no, he wishes he did. But
he sold it.
I've had a weird life. Like, I mean, it's like looking back in time going like, I was playing like dive bars with a Dumble when I was like 20, 21.
Yeah.
But, and again, if I went back and listened to what I was doing at the time, I'm sure whatever tones, like, I was probably running through like a Digitech, like multi-effects.
Yeah, like you weren't utilizing it the way that it could have been utilized. Yeah.
But I do remember sitting in my friend Joe's house, plugging into it when he first got it, going, and I'm in my mind going like, he spent how much? Like, because the idea, like, I think it was like, at the time, like, you could get one for like $6,000, which in '91 for an amp, it was like, what? Like,
it's like, what are you doing?
Nowadays, like, if you want to spend $5,000-6,000 on an amp, there's a billion out there for that. Not vintage collectible ones or two rocks. There's a bunch.
Yeah.
Then it was like you could buy 10 of anything you wanted for that. Like, but
that's a lot of money back then, man. Like, wow.
But I cut my teeth on some really interesting things. It was kind of like shaped my ear of like, wow. Like, I think it was right after that I was like, I got the PV Classic and it was cool, but I was like constantly chasing. I was like, well, this isn't quite as cool. It's like
that amp was great.
That was awesome.
I had that amp and I toured with that amp in my old band, Tribe of Ben, forever. And
was it the 410?
I had the 410 and the 115.
Me too.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That amp was great, and like that's an amp that I think I didn't really know how to use well.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really understand at the time the whole pre-circuit and how to get it to break up better. So that amp was basically, I was running that clean as a whistle, and then I was using pedals to get the dirt. But I wish I would have kind of understood more about that head and to get it to push a little bit more, because I think I could have gotten to where I am now quicker.
Well, and that's the process too. Is part of it is how many aux presets do I normally use? That's a good question. I used to mainly use one or two. When I'm honestly right now, I leave the app open all the time, and I am just constantly changing it. Like I'm just sitting there flipping through cabinets, and I go, oh yeah, because I mean, and I'm changing the mics. Like it's really in the moment. It's like sitting there turning knobs on the amp, going like, and I've saved a couple of my favorites, but I almost feel like I never use the preset knob. I'm just, because I'm not using it live, so I don't have, like if I was using it live, but if I'm going to like Jim Ebert's and using it, I've just got my iPad sitting next to me. Yeah. So like the aux controls are just, it's like having the knobs there. So it's constantly changing. And that's what I love about it. I'll be in the middle of a session sitting here with stuff up, and I'm just sitting there playing the part, and I'm going like that cabinet. Oh, hey, that's cool. Oh, wait, it's a little bright. Let me do the off axis. So then it's like you find the one that's getting you 90% there, and then you try mics. Yeah. So it's constant tweaking for me, Mark.
Bryan is like my Yoda in a way. You might not remember this, Bryan, but like I remember when we were doing that gig at San and Joe's, and I was setting up my board. And I was like, why every time I turn on my fuzz pedal, why am I getting a squeal? And you're like, dude, you can't put a buffer in front of it. And I was like, what? And you're like, you can't put that tuner, switch the tuner in the fuzz. And I did. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell, dude? Why did I not know that for years?
I mean, I've geeked out on this stuff, but also like, I'm certainly no expert, and I'm constantly learning too. And I've discovered things in the past year that I was doing wrong, that like, or just all of a sudden I switched something. I was like, holy crap, that sounds so much better. And other people would have been like, yeah, no duh. Like, we've been doing, like...
Give me an example of that.
Like DI boxes. Like, I never really was into DI boxes, like, even on, like, gigs, because it was like... Or just, like, if I'm recording on the... it's got an instrument in. because I'm like, well, a DI box is just, and then all of a sudden when you try different DI boxes and you're like, wow, they do sound different. And like I started recording bass instead of through the instrument, and I've got like this deep DI box, or I've got this API thing that like all of a sudden I was like, holy crap, it sounds so much better.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it's just DI is just changing the impedance, or you know, I'm not running long cables, and even on gigs, like plugging my acoustic out of my pedal board, because I'm coming out of the pedal board, and I'm like, well, I can run into a line out because there's a preamp in it. And then I was like, and then I actually ran it into a DI because I'm right next to the mixer. I was like, well, it's a 1/4-inch cable here to there. It's not a big deal. I get like DI boxes if the board's back there. So I decided to bring this out on my acoustic gig and plugged out of that and I was like, oh, I've been playing acoustic for 25 years with a much crappier sound than I could have. I was like, how did I not know?
That's a really good segue. So let's really quick. I want you to show them that acoustic.
Yeah, man.
So, and then I gotta let you get back to your day.
Yeah.
But so Bryan showed me this acoustic. Here, let me put.
There's a stand.
This blew my mind.
There's a stand. Yeah, a couple. I mean, that's actually a PRS cable, but it's not. I mean, other companies do that too. It's just a.
I had no clue.
Yeah.
Talk about. All right, there's another thing. Chalk it up to Bryan taught me.
Yeah, those things have. And look, that's my cable is not silent. That's
he doesn't have a fancy cable.
So this is I have a handful of acoustics, not nearly as many. My main gigging acoustic is not even down here. It stays upstairs. It's a beat up, I say old, but it's like 90s. It's a laminate Martin, the DM, laminate back and sides. That is the guitar that I bring up when people sit there and tell me, oh, don't buy this. Don't buy a laminate guitar. Or like somebody's like, oh, you can't buy a non-true bypass. Well, there's certain things that people will say where they get hung up on so somebody asked a question about the S2 McCarty compared to the Core. The S2 line, bang for the buck, I think is amazing. It's, they're made in Maryland. It's what you're changing is like, it's not as blingy. It doesn't have... The top is not going to be as figured. It doesn't have the violin carve. It's the flat with the bezel. I mean, sound-wise, playability-wise, I mean, they're incredible. Like, they're a lot less money. It really depends on how much does the look of that carved top mean to you, I love the S2 stuff. So
I had two of them. I had a Starla and I had a semi-hollow Mira.
Well, so those both only live in that line. So like those are, or they, I mean, there isn't like a Core Mira and a Core, or I mean, they're kind of but I mean.
But the hollow body versus the SE hollow body.
Right. Well, but that's an import. So that's the SEs are import made in a different place. Still bang for the buck. Great. The S2 lives in the middle. The S2 are like, how can they build a guitar in Maryland, like that's not.
$5,000.
Right, and the biggest thing, it may not seem like it, but like they taught me all this stuff when I was like going out and doing clinics, because it's like, why is it so much cheaper? It's almost all about time. Those carves take a ton of time, not just to carve and sand, but then the finish process, because the finish is so thin, and the little bit of time that I did work there in the 90s buffing guitars, I can't tell you how many guitars I ruined, because you get this thin finish, and on these little lips, you hit it just a little too hard and it burns right through the finish.
Ooh.
And they don't touch those up and resell them. It's very easy to
you done effed up.
So like I think the numbers they told me is like a Core guitar, depending on the model, might be 20 to 22, 24 hands-on skilled labor hours of like craftsman hours of somebody, whether it's frets or dressing or all the different sanding stages. Just changing it to a flat guitar that can be block sanded and beveled, it cuts, because there's so many sanding processes both in the wood shop and the finish hall, it cuts it down to like 12 to 14 hours.
Dang.
So when you're that's where like U.S. labor is where the cost is. So it's still the same. They're pulling it from the same quality mahogany. The difference is like they're not going to take some killer quilted maple top and put it on a S2.
Yeah, of course.
But that's all visual. That's all.
fair.
It's cosmetic, you know.
Yeah.
But for acoustics, like, pick it up, play it if it sounds good to you. Don't worry about if somebody says, "Oh, that can't sound good because of this thing," or if people talk about, "Oh, it's got import pickups," or what. Like, don't listen to anybody.
Dude, I think
Listen
those
to your
pickups
ears.
in the SE hollow body sound awesome.
The SE pickups sound killer.
They're great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun.
And
But this guitar is what? So it's a Gibson.
this is a 1959 J45,
Okay.
and this was my desert. This is my desert island acoustic because I'm not like a bluegrass flat picker. I love it, but it's not my like. I'm a strummer primarily, and I'm a Beatles geek.
Yeah, you are.
But those tones, like the singer songwriter, like British pop bands of the '60s, '70s, and like once I realized that like that J45 really like it's a different scale. It's the different style of construction. I love Martins, and I geek out, but like to fit in a band mix to me, like this guitar is the sound. Like, and
Do you know my buddy Jeremy, the guitar hunter?
I don't.
Do you know that cat? You should follow him on Instagram and stuff. But Jeremy has.
I mean, I might. The name is familiar.
He's got a channel. He's does really well on YouTube, but his whole thing is mostly acoustics. He would flip his lid to
Yeah.
do this thing in person.
I've had like
Yeah.
do you know Dan Haas, local singer songwriter guitar? I mean, he does cover gigs and stuff, but he's put out some great records, and I've been playing with him off and on for 20 some years. He plays electric too, but he grew up playing acoustic, and he have a really nice Taylor. He mainly plays a Loudon right now, which is awesome.
Yeah, those are cool.
He owns an Olsen. He bought an Olsen back in the day, which is just. He has some really really nice guitars.
Right.
And honestly, like he's a little bit more deep into the acoustic world. Like my needs of acoustic are he's a killer fingerstyle guitar player. So like sometimes I like to get somebody like that to play it, to be like, I play acoustic a very certain way. Like so I know what I want, but it might not appeal to everybody.
Yeah.
Same thing, bass. I play bass a certain way. So like I know I like it, but sometimes I want to get a real bass player to play it and go like, oh yeah, like did I get a good one?
That's
You
a
know what I mean?
guitar
Like,
player playing bass.
but like I remember Dan came over and played this, and he's like, oh great, now he's like, now I got to find myself an old J45. I was like, yeah.
Dude, as soon as you put it in my hands and I just played a G, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like,
It records beautifully.
like almost tearful. Like
Yeah.
that's how good that thing sounds. I mean, it really does.
This wasn't so. I'm going to give a quick shout out to like there's a lot of people. When you do this, you meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
You get and people hook you up in different ways. Give you discounts or And I've been very fortunate to have a lot. I mean, whether it's pedal builders or but locally, like Atomic Music has been a go-to for me. Like I find, and they're always great. Like you walk in there.
Like, what's funny? Rhett Shull, who's going to be on the show next week, he said that that's his favorite music store
It's incredible.
on the East Coast.
Now, mind you, you can go in there and like 90% of what they have in there is garbage, and it's cheap. But they turn stuff over fast, and you can walk in there and find something, and whatever they have, it'll be reasonable, and usually you don't have to even haggle. Like you go, hey, and this will be tagged at whatever, and they'll be like, give me this, and if you're buying a couple things, and I have a long history with it. Lewis, one of the owners, I drove there and traded a 1980 Volkswagen Rabbit convertible for a Rickenbacker 12 string back in the 90s. So we go back. My weird gear stories go on, but this wasn't so a lot. Like I love Atomic. I go there all the time. I send people there all the time. If you're anywhere near DC, look up Atomic Music. It's a massive pawn shop that's nothing but like keyboards and pedals and you name it. Like, if you need a little practice amp, they got a million things. If you're looking for something vintage, it comes and goes. But Garrett Park, I used to teach there. Rick Hogue owns Garrett Park.
That's in Annapolis, right?
Yeah, he finds some of the most insane vintage stuff. Like he's on these guitar safari. He's sold guitars recently to like Jason Isbell and Bonamassa and stuff. Like he finds some incredible stuff. And and it's not a massive store, but he really handpicks stuff, and some stuff never goes through the store. He buys it. He has his.
Yeah.
But that P bass, this guitar, he helped me find this old Super Reverb. Like I have a couple clutch pieces that
Thanks
like
to him.
every once in a while he'll call me, and if he says he's got something magic, you know it's good.
And then you're like, man.
You're gonna have to sell something, but but like, and Jeff at Baytunes, Jeff Packett at Baytunes, he's like not just with gear, but also like I had an issue with the tone pot on that Collings. He hooked that up in short order. Phil Jacoby is the man.
He's
like
my go-to.
Jeff Bober, like recently, so like there's so many great people around here. Ryan Fowler's hooked me up so many times. I'm like, I need a pedal, and it's like I call him, and he's like, come on up, and there's so many great people around here, like repair people. Phil Jacoby, Bober. I used to use Dave Barber all the time for amp repair. He lives up in Pennsylvania now, but
oh right.
There's so much, and there's I have to list the people a mile long at PRS who take care of me, like
Yeah, I'm sure.
Paul Miles and Skitchy and those guys, like Doug, Doug who does the he's one of the main SE guys. He basically rebuilt the truss rod on my old Rickenbacker bass. Like I brought it in there with an issue, and like and some guy, like I had a top crack in here that some of the like. I'm not saying to call PRS and expect like they do certain things for friends more like but there's just a wealth of amazing people around here, store owners, luthiers.
We do have a pretty good scene here, man.
It's an amazing scene, and part of it's because there's so many players. So and there's great players, and I think the magic thing about Baltimore, Annapolis, DC, Northern Virginia. It's multiple metropolitan areas.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much work. Like, I've made my living playing guitar, and sometimes it's really fancy kind of stuff, and it's like tours. But most of the time, it's bar gigs, and it's like whatever pays the bills. But there's been bar gigs 7 days a week if you need it. If you need a Monday gig, there's places.
Yeah.
Maybe not for a full band, but if you can do solo gigs, so.
I always mention that to people about Baltimore in terms, even if you think about like Fells Point is like 6th Street in Austin, it's like you can walk down the street and every single bar is going to have live music and and good musicians.
Well, but the reason there's so many good musicians around here is that it's like if your town is too small and you want to make living, you got to move. You got to move to a place where there's a scene. Mm-hmm. But you live in a place that's too big or where people flock. Like people flock to Nashville, they flock to New York. LA, like there's scenes where people go, or Boston,
Yeah.
You can't make a living in Nashville doing bar gigs. There's no money in it. Like that's
you
where
pay
you
to play sometimes.
Right, and that's where you cut your teeth and or your networking and but like you got like so you go to LA and you find these guys who are really good players and they're driving an Uber to make ends meet while they're trying to make something happen. Like so the good players don't exodus from the scene. Some of them do and come back because they're like, well, I moved to Nashville for 6 years and I came back here because I'm making so much more money here. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, like session work, you can do stuff virtually. Like this, the reason I can do this here, I couldn't have done this 20 years ago. I got it started, but so I've played on records for people I've never personally met or they can live anywhere. And they can send me tracks and I can have them stuff to them overnight. Mm-hmm. It's like that world just couldn't have happened. So you don't have to go live in a music mecca and do and then what you do is you find your niche. What do you bring to the table? And still finding the work isn't necessarily it takes time to develop your thing, but
once you get hooked in though and you get it happens like organically. I feel like in this town.
Were you born in Baltimore?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was born I was born in Maryland, but I moved up. But I've lived basically near Annapolis my whole life. This definitely the bar scene. Like I grew up. This is all I knew. And
it's a good hub too because you can go Baltimore, DC, Northern Virginia, Annapolis.
And there's tons of work even just in Annapolis. There's so many venues, but not huge venues, but places that will have live music and multiple days of the week. Can
we say, just to interrupt for a second, can we say that I think that the music going people and audience in Annapolis is one of the most vibrant, beautiful,
super supportive.
Very
It's a very,
into it.
it's kind of, well, you know, like you go to Austin, you go to certain places, and there's a very artistic appreciation for the arts, whether it's music, whether it's, you know, visual arts, all kinds of stuff. And and Annapolis is also lucky that, you know, there is some money here too. Like there's, you know, it's not
DC
like
bedroom community.
it's not hoity-toity money. It's like boater money, but it's so you get people who have some means and they enjoy, you know, supporting art. So it's kind of a perfect storm for like I just lucked into being born here. Like I would have, you know, I just as when the more I traveled, the more I realized like, oh, how well we have it back here. There's a really not just a nice scene for places to play, but like the people, the musicians. It's not cutthroat. It's not like, oh, I got to protect my gig because I don't, you know, like if I can't make a gig, I'll call somebody and be like, hey, can't do this and throw the work to them. Like there's plenty of work to go around. So, and it spoils us because when you need a drummer, when you need a bass player, whatever, like there's so many. They're great. Like, and we've both been fortunate to play with a lot of them. And I mean, I know like some people like trying to get their foot in the door because of that, because there's so many. Can also be sometimes hard to find work because you have so many great players.
Yeah.
But,
I was talking to Mike Gambone on the way down here
Yeah.
about covering something. I haven't played with him in a while, but they like talk about like another drummer in the scene that's just ridiculously good, talented, and it's crazy, man. It's a great place to live. It really is. I'm glad we came back here after Boston. And, I mean, I think if we would have stayed in Boston, I don't think I would have been as happy because the scene there, albeit, is cool, and there's like a lot of really good like musicians coming from like college bands and stuff that all these different schools. But like, talk about a city where you can't really get paid to play. There's not a lot of money up there in terms of like bars aren't willing to like throw $600 for a trio on a Friday night even.
Well, cities,
like,
I think big cities are hard. Like, because it's like, I mean, even Fells Point, like even Baltimore, like there's gigs, but the gigs don't pay as well because it's kind of like, hey, there's just going to be people here. We just need you to entertain them. You don't like if the town is smaller, like the beauty of Annapolis, the downtown is all walkable. So Fells Point is walkable, but like Baltimore in a whole, like if you're not like right in Federal Hill, right in Fells Point, like you don't bar hop from Federal Hill to Fells Point. No. You know what I mean? So like, it's like if you live there or you hang out there, it's one thing, but like downtown. When I played downtown Annapolis in my youth, like all the time, it was the weekday gigs were the best because it was all some local residents, but it was all service industry. It was the people who got off work at all the restaurants, the myriad of millions of restaurants downtown.
And congregate.
And it would be a Monday night. There'd only be one or two things happen on a Monday night. So it wouldn't even get crowded until 10 or 10:30. And they all come in and they all just made their cash tips so they're ready to hang and party. And they don't have to be at work until 4 p.m. the next night. And now, again, that scene changes, but that's what, like, so there was always a crowd, like 7 nights a week, as long as you were bringing something interesting, you know, and, but man, I used to play Armadillos downtown Annapolis 3 nights a week with 3 different bands. Like, I had residencies every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for years, and if one ended, or if we wanted to quit, another one could just pop up, like, and it was different music and different gear. Like the hard part was like, oh, Tom playing acoustic tonight, or but it also,
man, that's a tough load-in.
Well, that's why I carried the super reverb all the time.
Oh my god, dude!
See, that's why like nowadays it doesn't bother me when people talk about like, well, that pedal board's kind of big. I'm like, it's not a super reverb going up and down the stairs.
Yeah, try carrying this 80-pound thing.
Yeah, but
oh man, well, dude, we got to get back to our day. I don't want to take up your whole day, but dude, this has been
thanks everybody for watching. Any questions and
it's like we've been talking about doing this for quite some time, and I appreciate you making some time for me to come by. And
if we were to go through all the guitars, it would be like a week long.
Oh my god, dude. Well, let's do a quick lightning round because we have.
Let's do it.
All right. So you know the drill, Harry. You're an alumni. We don't have to hem and haw about this.
Quick answers. I'll try.
All right, guys. So
my API mug. Thank you, Dave Garrett, my man.
But we, since we've already done this before, I'm not gonna hit you with the same stuff.
Okay.
Or I'm at least gonna. I'm gonna try not to. All right. First question. Joey or Ariel?
Oh, wow, that's nearly impossible. I would say I'm gonna go with Joey because he's the guy I discovered, and if it weren't for Joey, I never would have heard Ariel. I love them both. I would say the same, but I have to give Joey credit for I discovered Ariel because of his association. So.
All right. You're rolling up into a sub shop. Whole wheat bread or white bread?
White or Italian. Yeah, Italian
Okay.
roll.
All right. Greek mythology. Minotaur or centaur?
Oh, Centaur, just because the guitar.
The
kind of fits.
mythical
Yeah.
$5 billion pedal.
Yeah.
Caddyshack or Animal House?
Caddyshack.
Minor Threat or Fugazi?
Fugazi.
Super lead or super bass?
Not growing up a Marshall guy, I've only recently got. I would have used to think super lead, but I think I'm gonna go super bass.
Okay, cool. Pogo stick or pogo ball? Remember the pogo ball when we were kids?
Oh, I could injure myself equally on both of them. I've never tried a pogo ball, so I'll go pogo stick.
All right. Dreadnought or Cutaway?
Oh, Dreadnought.
All right. As far as theme songs go for TV shows, which one do you prefer? Family Ties or Growing Pains?
Totally Family Ties.
All right, dude.
So
How has no one sampled that?
So here now I may get the story a little bit wrong, but like Family Ties was written by or co-written by Tom Scott, the sax player who played with, he's
I don't
Steely
know
Dan,
the dude.
Toady,
Oh, really?
Toto, like session player. I mean, he had he's got his own band. He's a legend. But he's been on all the Joni Mitchell stuff, George Harrison, and an icon, but also an arranger, a song he does these Take Six gigs. When I go out and do the
You're on a stage with that kid?
yeah. So I've got to hang over the past. We were on the road for 2 months when the pandemic hit, and I'm geeking out over all the. But there's so many great musicians in that tour, but Tom especially the Joni Mitchell, the Steely Dan, George Harrison, I'm sitting there going okay, I hope I'm not annoying asking you a million questions. But he's amazing and he loves talking these stories. So he actually has a podcast.
Oh, really?
And he's played so many you were oh, that was him. Oh, that was him. But amazing stories. Well, he co-wrote that song.
Really?
And apparently whoever brought him the original idea was what do we do without us? What do we do without us? And he's no, we got to change it. So he took the idea, the theme, but that arrangement, that song is him.
Super bassy, man.
And I hadn't listened to it in a long time. After he told me that story, and I went back and listened to it, I was oh yeah.
Dude, that intro, the
dig into Tom Scott stuff, man. You'll be his band, he would play with Richard T. and it's all these crazy, his 70s stuff, the LA Express, fusion stuff is incredible. He's played with Jocko and all the
Good Lord.
But he also on his podcast he'll be talking about songs he played on, and he played on Billie Jean. He played some a wind controller part. He was talking about I think it was "Listen What the Man Said" from McCartney.
Wings, yeah.
And he had played with Ringo. He had done tons of stuff with George, but I guess McCartney was in L.A. doing this record, and he was they had recorded that song, and they were man, it needs something.
Is it the soprano sax solo?
Yeah. So it's and I think it was either that song or No More. No, it was "Listen What the Man Said," and he said they called, he got a phone call because they were man, it needs something, and somebody's Tom Scott lives down the road from here. We want to call him, see if he wants to maybe add something. So he gets a call. Hey, you want to play on this McCartney tune? He's sure. He packs up. He goes in. They're playing the song to him, and he's just basically warming up and listening to it. And at the end, they're perfect take. He's here, and he was no, no. Paul's no, man, no, it's great. So the take was him hearing the song, and kind of warming up.
And warm it up.
And
oh my god.
And they didn't. And he was no, I'd love another take. And they're no, no.
Oh man!
But
That's
look up his
crazy.
podcast, like, and he tells his little Instagram thing. He tells all these little great stories, like there's like some Carpenter's tune with like a penny whistle song that like, and when you hear it, or something
Right,
like
right,
you're
right,
like,
right.
oh yeah, I've heard that a billion times.
Oh,
He's
man.
played so much stuff.
That's nuts. All right, last one, and you didn't get to do this the first time around because I hadn't started this yet. But if you could take one album
Mm-hmm.
and erase it from your memory,
So you could hear it again for
so
the
you
first
could-
time.
Yeah.
Oh
What
wow.
would that be?
See, I've thought about like the Desert album. I'd have to say honestly, there's so many records that have profoundly impacted me, and of course I could always go back. I mean, the Beatles stuff would be obvious. Pet Sounds has been huge for me. I mean, Pink Floyd Animals is one of my favorite records of all time. But I'd have to say, I went back and I didn't grow up in the '60s. I don't, that stuff I discovered later on, and it all had. I would give it much more credit as far as culturally than this. But for me, Jellyfish, Spilt Milk
Okay.
was like, because I was a guitar geek. Like I was like Van Halen, and I got into Eric Johnson. I love Stevie Ray Vaughan too, but I also loved like Holdsworth and Vine. Like I was guitar, and I like songs, but I wasn't really as much of a song guy. Like I would fast forward songs to the solo. Like I was very guitar blinder, and then I had already I was getting out of that, but that record, like it hit me like the soul. Like the first record is great too. Their first record is amazing, but Spilt Milk, to me, like it's John Bryan and Lyle Workman playing guitar. Like I didn't realize how much it affected my playing. When I listen to stuff I do now as a session player with my band Starbelly, I realize like, oh, I totally stole that from, not from the Eric Johnson, not the guitar stuff. It would be like the solo in Big Mistake or something. Like it's like I didn't realize how much that influenced and directed my.
Like imprinted on your DNA.
Totally did, because I never even learned those songs. I never sat down. I mean, recently
I haven't either.
So they were things that influenced me without me sitting down and like, oh, I'm shredding these licks or working out this stuff. It was tone sensibilities and part sensibilities, and it had nothing to do with like whether the song even had guitar on it or not. Like it was like. And since then, it's kind of like I'm much more of a song-based guitar player in my appreciation. I still love the other stuff, but dude, that record was. I mean, that's also right when I really started writing music, and I had a band that we started. So like that record was brand new when I was in the studio with my first band. So like I would listen to that record and like, how do we make it sound like this? And it's very orchestrated too. I mean, I don't want to say overproduced, but it's
pretty produced.
So it's kind of like, but I love that. Like some people are like, but I only love it when it's done right and well. Like I don't want a billion things just to have a billion things. So, but yeah, that record, if you're not hip
It's
to
a good one.
Spilt Milk, the Spilt Milk record, headphones. If you haven't heard it before the first time, it's ridiculous.
It's changed my life too.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that I mean, the summer I heard that album, my buddy introduced me to it, and like we listened to it. We went out every night, that summer. Every single night of the week, we went to Uno's to drink, and because I went through a really bad breakup, and like that album got me through it, man. It's really weird. It's like music can heal so much in your life, and it's like that record in particular, that pinpoint moment in my life. That will always have a place in my heart because of the scenario and the situation around what was going on in my life. But like, man, like just from start to finish, like when I had Warren Heward on a while back.
Yeah, I know he's done the things with Roger and
yeah. I threw at him, Belly Button or Spilt Milk, and he's a Belly Button guy, but
yeah, Dennis from my bandmate in Starbelly, my friend Dennis Shockett, he's more of a Belly Button guy. Even my son Aiden, who loves them both, I think he likes Belly Button better, and I get it. Like I love the songs on both. It's the production, the package of Spilt Milk to me is like such a masterpiece. Like I don't want to listen to it unless I can put it on beginning to end, and like it's kind of a concept album in that, like, to me it's But it's like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to start with what's going on, and I don't want to turn it off until you get to, Inner City Blues. Like, I mean, like, that to me is like, it's an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to do. It's a lost art form nowadays. It's
Oh,
all
man.
singles. But I think the other reason that one sticks out in my mind more now, I've never, like, that album's never, like, disappeared. I never went like, oh, I totally forgot about that record.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
no.
always been there. But
It's like Jeff Buckley's Grace.
oh,
Those two
dude,
might love that album.
incredible. But
So.
but my appreciation for Spilt Milk and the song New Mistake even grew more last year because when I was stuck at home, I was doing these cover songs with my sons.
Yeah, I forgot.
And we did, actually the first one we did one a couple years ago that was just a gift for my wife, a James Taylor song that she loves, and like the boys and I played it. And then Aiden did Last Goodbye, where he played and sang all of it for a school project.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first time I really went in, like, let's dissect it. Let's try to match tones, bass tones, snare tone. Like, how close can we get? The point of this is not to do an interpretation.
Sounded like.
But it was just like when you were, like, it taught me a lot as an engineer because, like, I never really did that. I did that with guitar tones. When you're a kid, you're like, I'm trying to sound like your idols,
Cobain,
right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like, and all of a sudden I realized, like, I used to just stick up mics and try to, like, get the snare to sound good, but I never went like, let me try to make it sound like this snare, right? And I mean, engineers do that all the time, but I never had done that,
Mm-hmm.
But then while we were stuck at home, it was like, well, let's do some, and a lot of them were for these AM/FM benefit things, like and so we did like, we did a Childish Gambino song, we did a Van Halen tune when Eddie died, we did a Neil Young tune, we did, like, it was kind of all over the place. But then we did a Zeppelin tune, and then it was like, okay, but they kind of kept getting more grandiose. We did Toto's Rosanna, but for a Christmas thing we changed it to Oh Santa. But that was the first, and then that's the first time I farmed other stuff out. People were sending me like iPhone videos of horn parts, but I got everything in there, And then Aiden and I were talking about, like, hey, we should do like a Jellyfish tune. And at the same time, a couple friends of ours, some young guys, were like, hey, have you ever thought about doing New Mistake from Jellyfish? We're like, we were just talking about doing it. So there's mainly four of us. But I ended up, like, they sent me tracks. We all sat on our own with headphones dissecting parts and going like, oh, there's this little glockenspiel here. But then I had, like, assembling that, the mix of it.
Oh, I'm sure.
First of all, there were things in there I never noticed before. I dug in so deep. But then just the arrangement of the parts and the mix and realizing all that stuff going on, but it never feels weird or it feels like out of left field to have this thing come and go. And, like, trying to recreate it, I was, like, even blown away more again. I was like, it's hard enough to recreate it. How do you create this? And,
Yeah.
like, coming from a guitar, bass, and drums kind of brain, I'm going like, this is mind-boggling the way this is orchestrated. But then the mix is like trying to mix it and go, how do you hear everything? How does everything have this place? It's like, and so it's, I mean, the band members, the session players, Albie Galutin, who produced that record, and Jack Joe Puig, who I'm like, that, like, to me, there's so many things, there was so much brilliance that just converged at that time. And because they thought they were going to be, MTV had really latched onto them and they thought they were going to be huge.
Mm-hmm.
They put so much money into that record.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Nirvana hits,
Yeah.
grunge hits, and all of a sudden this overproduced thing, like music with guitars was everything. So it was like, but they would have never have been able to do that a couple years before, and definitely a couple years later, it just wouldn't happen. It landed at the wrong time to be commercially successful,
Yeah.
which is a shame. But
Super shame.
yeah, it really is such a, like, I don't think I could ever get bored digging into that record, and the idea of, like, hearing it for the first time would blow my mind.
Yeah, I know, man. Well,
that was fun, man.
that's good. Yeah. Nice. Well, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Hey, BV. I think, so next time we do this, Brian,
Does anybody else hear a metronome, or is it just me? Yeah.
No, that was on purpose.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
So, thanks for hanging out, guys. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Brian, thank you to you. We'll see you later. click that red button at the top right corner,
Okay.
and then we're all good. That's,
See you, folks.